Welcome.
Welcome.
We have a very special episode today. I don't know that this has ever happened. You could fill me in on this. I don't know that anyone has ever had a Monroe Institute trainer come and do their show. I don't know if it happens or not ever, but I'm very honored to have Arki with us here today from the Institute. I don't know. I'm just shocked that we're even here.
I'm really excited.
You know, like
Thank you for being here.
Thank
Seriously,
you so much.
we're excited.
And to be honest, I never thought of it. And it could very well be that it's the first time. But, well, there must have been someone. You know, it's been so many years. But
Yeah.
if there was one, I haven't seen it.
I don't know. I just like doing the gateway. So we'll get into a little bit of like how we came connected. And then, you know, we have so many things that we want to learn about you. But for the listener, when we did the Monroe series in July and I went to the creator program, Arki was my trainer. And we've been going back and forth about having him come out and do the show. So for months now, we've been sort of making this happen. And it's just like an amazing opportunity for us to fulfill my end of the bargain, being invited to Monroe to make content. So I was just like, well, you know what? Maybe I could bring them to me, you know? So I don't know. It's like such an honor to have you guys here. And the next we have Emily, which is one of the other trainers that was there with us, but she wasn't training us. But, you know, we'll get into all that stuff. So we're very happy to have you here, Arki.
Thank you. And I'm so happy to be here. So thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's been quite a journey, and it took a while, you know, to figure things out and to be able to. And also thank you guys. I want to say this publicly too. For accommodating to do this on a Sunday, and you know, because it was the only time that we could do it.
No brainer.
Come here and everything.
It was a no-brainer. I'm very, very excited. It's just such a spectacular thing that you guys do over at Monroe. It's so incredible and singular and unique, and I just want to learn everything that I can about it. It's really fascinating. It truly is. How long have you been involved with Monroe?
Since 2006 or 7, I think. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't... How long has the Monroe Institute been around?
Like 50 years?
Yeah.
Since the 70s. I think it's like 71 or 2. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I thought it was relatively... I mean, I thought maybe 20 or 30.
they've never promoted.
Uh-huh.
That's the new wave that they're on, right? I mean, Monroe's never really promoted before. It's all been kind of like my family in the sense that like people came to them and things developed, and I think now they're like, okay, maybe we should promote.
Yeah, it's just been like
You know?
word of mouth kind of.
Yeah, mostly. And I don't know where this came from. I remember Bob Monroe back in the day used to say, he had a belief, and he was vocal about it. He used to say, whomever is supposed to be here is going to end up showing up here.
Yeah.
And so I guess he had a belief like he didn't really need to promote it, like people would be drawn to it.
Sure.
Those who needed to be there. Or maybe he didn't want to have too wide of an audience to not to dilute the thing. I don't know. I really don't know what his rationale was. But
Yeah.
yeah, we never really did much of advertising in a big way, so to speak.
Yeah.
Wow.
So obviously it goes without saying you never got to meet Bob Monroe, right?
No.
Because he died in the 90s, I think.
He died in 1995, I think.
Yeah. What was it? Cancer? Or I can't remember. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But yeah, so Monroe has been basically, it's been this powerful force in the field of consciousness that literally like never even needed to be promoted.
Yeah.
And yet they have helped and changed the lives of millions of people. So they got together and they're like, whose idea was it? Are we allowed to say that for the creator program?
I'm not sure whose idea it was. I don't know if it was Nestle or was Jennifer or marketing director. I really don't know how it all started. All I know is that at some point I was thrown into it. Someone called me and said, hey, Arki, would you be interested in training this? And to be honest, at the beginning, I was like, well, I don't know. We've never done this. We never had a gateway with cameras and microphones and the whole lot. And I was a little concerned, to be honest. I was thinking, how is this going to play out? What do we do with privacy? What do we do with... because we always say that the space we create at Gateway or any other program is a sacred space where first thing we trainers need to do is create this real safety that you can feel so you can let go and you can let your experiences unfold. And I was like, how is this going to work if we have cameras on people?
Yeah.
So it was a little tricky, but it worked out beautifully.
Yeah. And I think on the other hand, on our side, we were feeling similar concerns. Not exactly what you're describing, from Monroe's perspective, but like at least I could say for me, I felt like an imposter being there. Now, Maya is obviously not here with us today, but she was the other trainer, and she's also just a wonderful human being. She did my intake, my interview, right? I remember meeting you after like the last person showed up and we had to go to the first event, and I like passed you in a doorway and you're like, "Oh, hi, I'm Arki. I look forward to, getting to know you." I was like, "Oh, cool." And just kind of passed you. But with Maya, I sat with her and I had like this long one-on-one, and I just remember telling her, she said something to the effect of like, what are you expect to get out of this? And I literally told her, I was like, "I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't even believe I can go out of body." Seriously, I felt like an imposter being there. Like, I don't know. And she was like, "Well, it's okay to have no expectation, but maybe try setting an intention." And I was like, I never thought of that. She was right. So, amazing week. We've already done a whole 3-part series talking about that week. If you would be comfortable with it, I'd like to get a little bit of your maybe take of like some of the things that happened there that stood out to you about that week. What it was like, I guess, but then otherwise there's so much stuff about you and other questions about programs you've done that I think we and the listener would like to know more about. So
yeah, so for me it was a great experience because, as I said before, I had these concerns. We never did this before, and there was all of this back and forth behind the curtain, like, how are we gonna do this? Where are the limits? How much they can film? How much is private? And we came to some compromise that turned out to be good. But still, I was, a little nervous, to be honest. And then on day one, when I met all of you guys, you and Chris and Hannah and everybody else, I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be fine."
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I just knew because of the quality of the people involved. And then I just thought, okay, I'm just gonna run it like any other gateway. I'm just gonna go on autopilot and do my thing, and then let them do their thing. Let the creators do their creator thing.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful, and it all blended really nicely, and it was very special.
Yeah.
And you guys were having amazing experiences too. And I was thinking, we were having a conversation about this before. I think that when there's going to be a larger audience, when the impact to a larger amount of people is gonna be there, then things happen because of that. So the message can be spread widely, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, we were talking about that before you guys showed up today. We were just kind of having this general conversation that, is it okay if I kind of go into what you're saying? Yeah, so he was telling the story. You guys aren't aware of this yet. It's in the Gateway, which I'm hoping that someday we'll, maybe be able to work that out for you guys, right? But so when Robert Monroe was getting started with the early days of the Institute, and please step in and correct me when I get this wrong, because I'm still learning, why, about the history of the Institute. But in the early days, he had this group called the Explorers, right? And they were like the original people that he trained to like do this, to go out of body. And the Explorers would go and they explored. Right? They explored, you could call it whatever you want, the spirit world or whatever.
So they explored
astral realm.
Out of body. Okay,
yes, they explored out of body. And there were many cases where they actually spoke to non-human intelligences, right? So what Arki was explaining to me was like, he was like, I can just imagine that when Robert Monroe was doing this in the early days and he was facilitating this environment where there's exploration and they're talking to these non-human intelligences, that maybe from the other side, these beings are like, well, they are facilitating an environment of safe and, I guess, effective contact between us and them, right? So he was saying like maybe they're trying to orchestrate events to where it's allowed to get out in a bigger way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
what they could read the intention of the people exploring,
and
doing
assist.
the exploring. Yeah, wow. That's really fascinating.
Yeah. I just wanted you guys to have context for what we were talking about.
So that was prior to the Institute even.
Yeah, that was on the early days. The thing is, very briefly, Bob Monroe was this regular businessman. He had no religious inclinations or esoteric or any kind.
Yeah.
He was a very successful radio professional, and he was working in Manhattan. And I think he was at the time vice president of NBC Radio. And then out of the blue, he just started popping out of body. And he had no context for it. He was freaking out. No one could tell him anything about it. There were no books back in the day, or very few. In his mind, he was only contemplating two possibilities. One, that he had a brain tumor. Two, that he was losing his mind.
Yeah.
Wow. So it just started happening to him.
Yeah.
He wasn't
sort of
seeking it.
spontaneously. And then, being the way he was, so left brain and so rational and so stubborn too, he thought, okay, no one can give me any answers. He had a lot of faith in, or a lot of trust in science. And he thought that science could explain everything. But then they couldn't.
Yeah, I can't explain that.
And he had many friends who were psychologists and psychiatrists and medical doctors. He went to all of them and they all said, Bob, you're fine. And he was like, well, I'm not.
Something's going on.
Something's going on. And then he said, okay, if no one can provide the answers for me, I'll find them. And he was kind of wealthy, so he put a lab together with, where they would measure anything that could possibly be measured. They didn't know what to do, so he recruited a couple of scientists who volunteered to do this. So they were measuring things like galvanic skin response and heartbeats and brainwaves while doing these meditations. To see if they could replicate it. That was another one of his dreams, if he could replicate that. And that's how they started, because he was a sound professional. He was a radio professional. So then they started using their expertise, see if we can use sound to facilitate these states. So in the early days, he had this team of people that he called the explorers, and they would just go to his place once in a while. He put like a lab in his basement. And he put it together, and people would just go there and lay on a bed, put on a pair of headphones, and he would be recording everything. So there was, just so you get an idea of how it was, there was two-way communication, like here, like microphone, headphones. Mm-hmm. So you would be in a dark room and you would be listening to his voice, and he would be listening to you, and he would be feeding sounds on your headphones. And he would be recording everything that you would say. And then eventually he published all those recordings. And those people there were not only making contact with non-physical beings, but the contact was ongoing. Like the same being would come like every week. Yeah. Like if you would be coming for your session on Tuesday evenings, that being would come to you on Tuesday evening and say something, okay, like we said last week, now such and such. And such.
Yeah. Like a therapy session with the beyond.
Yeah. And it was like, so they could really get very, very detailed. And ask them any question about the nature of the universe, the nature of reality, what have you. And all of those are there.
They're on YouTube.
Yeah, and also on the Internet Archive, you can find them. So again, back to your point, I think since these guys up there, whomever they are, they say, oh, look at what this human did, He's got all this recording equipment, and we know that he's going to publish this to a larger audience. Okay, let's make something. This is a window for us to communicate with humans. So probably the same happened during your gateway. Okay, this is going to be brought to a larger audience, so let's make something special.
It was definitely special. It was, I think I could probably confidently speak for all of us that it was life-changing. I mean, just for the simple fact alone that you guys are sitting here with me and we're doing this and we're having fun and, we're these lifelong bonds that have formed, and we're all kind of pushing out of our ordinary routines, and like I feel like the collaboration that's come from this and is going to continue to come from this. Like when Amy was here a month or two ago, Illuminating Joy, for those who've heard the show, she's obviously she was there at the Gateway. She told me something. She was like, I don't think any of us realize how big that week really was. The change that it's going to leave on all of us, and like that week was just the beginning of what is to come, right? And I totally feel that. But they know all about what happened. We did a whole 3-part series, so I want to shift to you, Arki. So you've been with Monroe since like 2006 or 7, right?
Yeah.
So something that I would really love to know is like, how did you align with Monroe? How did you shift your path to be a part of the Institute? What was happening?
Well, so this was something totally unexpected. I mean, it wasn't my radar at all. Actually, I knew nothing about the Monroe Institute. I knew nothing about Robert Monroe. I knew nothing about the sounds that we use. I heard of it, binaural beats, in relation to meditation, but that was all. so basically what happened to me, I was working in logistics back in the day, and I was doing this specialty course on something they call short sea shipping, which is basically moving trucks and containers across the Mediterranean on boats, and all the logistics about that. And during a break, during that class, and the class took place on a boat, on a ferry boat. And during a break, this guy who was also in my class sat with me, and we started talking about meditation and things like that. And that's something I always had an interest on from a very early age. So all those things, and UFOs, and all those things were like fascinating to me. And then he said, "Have you? Do you know about binaural beats?" And I said, "Well, I heard of it, but never really used them." I said, "Okay, I have some of that. I can share it with you." And then he said, "Do you know about Bob Monroe?" I said, "No." "Oh, you don't?" I said, "Well, no." And I said, "Okay, I've got his books, and I got the books from him." And so I go back home, and then I started reading the books, and I was fascinated like never before.
Wow.
Something really hit me, and I thought, wow, what this man did was really astounding. So I think I read all 3 books in like 5 days and nights. Because I seriously, I couldn't put them down. I would read all night.
Wow.
And then as much during the day as I could. And then it was like, wow, that was so great. And then he mentions the Gateway Voyage in the books. And then it was like, well, that would be great, but that's pretty far away, because I was living in Spain at the time. And I was like, I don't have the time or the money to go to Virginia now and do this. And I thought, well, whatever. And then a few years down the road, I'm looking up something on the internet, and I see Gateway Voyage, Spain. It's like, what? And I'm like, is this real? And there was a phone number, so I called. And there was this American lady living in Spain, and she was a Monroe trainer. And she was the only one, or one of the very few, that was actually doing any Monroe stuff outside of the US. And I said, so do you have a gateway? And she said, yep. In November, I said, okay, book me up. Sign me in. And so, yeah, I never looked back. I mean, I did a gateway. It was fascinating to me, literally life-changing, like you said. And it made so much sense. And it was such a no-nonsense, no dogma, no fluffy things. I wanted things to be, because I knew these things were real, other places, other realities. But that approach that we use, that it's so matter of fact.
Yeah. It's a scientific approach.
Yeah.
It's data. It's all based on data.
Exactly. Yeah. And also the technique for, for tuning into those realities through sound. It's also simple. And so, but the elegance of it on the simplicity of
it's efficient.
Yeah, exactly. It's just efficient. It just works.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have all the candles and incense and things. Right?
That's like what Maya told me when I did my first interview with her. She was like, I lived in India for 2 years and doing like transcendental meditation. And she said, but then I came to the Monroe Institute and I got more out of it in 1 week than I did living in India for 2 years. And I thought about that deeply. I'm like, wow, that's really powerful. And I think, like, based off of what you're saying, it's amazing. Like, the Monroe Institute is so amazing because it is, like you said, it's no nonsense. There's no rituals. There's no creeds. There's one creed. It's literally like, no, you don't have to believe anything except you are more than your physical body.
Yeah, and even that, we invite, that's the only little piece of dogma that we have, that you are more than your physical body. But even that one, we invite everyone to challenge it.
Yeah.
Is this true? Am I really more than my physical body? And then we give you the tools, and it's like, here, now you can try. Now you can really figure out whether you are or not more than your physical body.
Yeah,
that's incredible. It gives people the opportunity to find the answer for themselves.
It's like,
that's the main thing.
Yeah,
we try to keep the teaching or whatever. We don't even consider ourselves to teach anything. Just facilitate experiences. And if you have questions, it's like, okay, here's the tools. Now you go out there, you find them for yourself. That's the way we like doing things.
Yeah. And I think efficient is the right word. I remember maybe a couple years ago, a year or two ago, Ryan started telling me about like theta wave states or theta states and binaural beats and this kind of stuff. And he's like, dude, this stuff is like a fast track to get you into that theta state. Like there are Tibetan monks that train their entire lives to get into this state, and this thing can get you there immediately. And I was like, what? Like, really? And then I start doing it for myself, and I'm like, okay, there's something to this. And then hearing his stories and his sister Emily's stories, and hearing all these stories of people that have really dedicated themselves to this process. And I think it really is something profound and kind of uncharted territory. It's also just incredible that this sort of thing is happening. I remember being a kid, and ever since I was little, I've always like had an intuitive feeling like energy that comes from the body is real, and the spirit is real, and consciousness is real. And I always had this like fantasy as a kid. I would always think, why aren't there like Hogwarts style institutions that are studying this stuff? Like, you know, we're studying like the atom bomb and like stuff in space and like all this, how to make food cheaper and like all this kind of stuff, which is important stuff. But ever since I was little, I remember thinking, I wish there was some kind of a place that just focuses on figuring this anomaly out, this strength. Because I always knew that we're more than our physical body. I just didn't know the specifics. And I'm really glad that this institution is a thing that exists. It's really incredible.
Yeah,
and I think it's important.
First time I found out, it was like, oh, someone really did this. You know?
Yeah. It's like, thank God somebody's doing it. Like somebody has to do it. I always thought that, and so I find myself really fascinated with the Monroe Institute right now.
Yeah, and also what you were mentioning about the effectiveness of it, to me, on the early days, because I had experience with meditation, but then when I tried the Monroe method, I was like, oh, wow. And I always used to say that to me, the difference was like between riding a bicycle and riding a motorcycle. It's just, kind of that comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah. And funny story, I don't know if you probably told it on one of the previous episodes. Back in the 90s, there was this Zen monk. He was 90 something. He went to the Gateway. He was taking Gateway, and I think it was Wednesday when they were trying Focus 15 or something. He got all agitated, and he said, I need to talk to Bob Monroe. And they were like, well, Bob is not here. Well, I need to talk to him. And he insisted, and eventually they called Bob and said, Bob, can you come, because he lived up in the mountain, can you come down to the Institute, because this gentleman wants to talk to you? And so Bob went there, and the Zen monk said, do you have any idea what you're doing here? And he was like, well, I've been doing it for like 40 years, I think I do. Yeah. kind of thing. And then the monk said, these people in my group here, they're reaching states of consciousness in just a few days. That takes us decades of sitting. And then the story was, I think it was on the Wall Street Journal or something, but it's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yes, you can get there by your own means and without guidance and without a framework, without anything, but it's way more difficult.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was he agitated in a way like he was concerned?
No, but he was like surprised more than anything. And he was saying things like, oh, you Americans, you always have to do everything fast.
Let's get it moving. We ain't got time for this.
Well, it brings up the question, right? Like, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but the first thing that comes to my mind is like, did I just waste my whole life trying to master this thing that I inherently can do if, shown a simpler way?
Yeah, he's 90. He's spent 90 years trying to get there, and then boom.
And it's not his fault because, right, this is relatively new territory, right? Like, Tibetan monks have been doing this for hundreds, if not, I guess it's hundreds of years. I don't know. You could argue in India they've been doing it for thousands. But then it's like we always find a newer, better way to do something. So it's nobody's fault that they haven't found this method. And, it's like, I guess technically nobody's wasted their life. There are some people out there, I've seen comments on previous videos of ours. There are some people who are like, well, this method is ancient and sacred and it's better because X, Y, Z. And it's like, that's good for you. My life is short. My time is valuable. I really appreciate this efficient method. Thank you.
Yeah, they didn't have headphones 1,000 years ago, so
yeah.
It's true.
We've evolved a bit.
Yeah, and they always, if you think of it, they always use sounds for reaching altered states of consciousness, like drumming
Bowls.
So this technology is not like new, but we just refined it. As you said, there were no headphones. Now we have them.
Yeah.
So now we can do that.
Yeah, it's evolution.
Yeah. And also a very good point. I'm not going to live forever. I often tell people, participants, it's not like we can live for like 1500 years here. You just have this lifetime, maybe other lifetimes. But for now you have this one. So, you may want to think of what you want to do with it and be efficient about it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I have to ask, what's it like going out of body?
Well, at the beginning, the first time it's shocking. First thing that most people experience is fear. It's usually the first reaction. It's fear. And it's a very primal fear, like real terror. That it's like very in your body.
Yeah.
And then once you get used to it, then curiosity kicks in. And they often say you cannot be curious and fearful at the same time. I'm not sure I fully agree. But yeah, that you shift from being fearful to, okay, now what's out there? And you start sniffing around. So usually a lot of people start there. Oh, is this thing real? Is the out-of-body state real? If it's real, I want to try it. I want to go there. That's how I started too. And I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours trying to go out of body. And I did succeed. Now in hindsight, it's like, was that worth it? And I think it was, but maybe I would have done things differently. Now I wouldn't focus so much on the phenomenology of the out-of-body state, but more on the content. Like, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
Because, going out of body gave me something invaluable, which I think the actual knowledge, like 100% in every cell of I was going to say your body, but guess what?
your energy body, right?
Yeah.
It's a body.
Spirit body.
Yeah. And so there's no way that you cannot know that that's real. Yeah. It's so real that it's like overwhelmingly real. Yeah. So it's not a belief anymore. You jump in a split second from believing or considering it as a possibility to just know it.
Yeah.
And then you also know, at least in my case, I knew that I was immortal. That's huge. I knew I wouldn't die the day I die. And that alone for me was like, it was worth all the hours I spent doing it. Now, once having done that, would I continue investing hundreds of hours in trying to go out of body? Well, maybe not. Maybe I would focus more on the content, like what I want to get out of it. And we also have at Monroe something that we call the phasing model, which is you don't necessarily need to leave your body. It's like you phase your consciousness out into a different frequency, so to speak. So you start perceiving, your attention shifts from this 3D physical reality into other realities. And then you start getting signal, getting data from there. And that's way, way easier than going out of body. And it's much more reliable, much more efficient, and it's repeatable. You can do it anytime, and you don't necessarily need to feel the vibrations and leave your body and all of that.
That's very interesting you say that, and I hope it's okay that I repeat the story. Right when you got here a few hours ago, we were talking about this, and something I haven't really told much to you guys. It's just kind of like hard to talk about because it's like, man, are people going to believe me? But ever since coming back from the Gateway experience, there have now been 4 occasions where I've spontaneously popped out of body laying in bed at night. And I know I already told you this story, but for the listener's sake, maybe I could get your take, because what I've experienced 2 nights ago is similar to what you just described. So I'll just start over and tell you again, right? So I'm laying in bed and I'm wide awake, and I start transitioning into another place where there's something communicating to me. I couldn't see it face on. It looked kind of like a glowing being, which, what that means to me, right? And there's like stars all around me. And I swear to you, I was like moving my hand, and the camera can see me, right? So, all right. So if my hand is right here by my side and I'm laying on my back trying to go to sleep, I'm going to swap hands here so you can see my little illustration. So this is my right hand, even though it's my physical left hand. It's right here. And I try to move my hand, and it feels like it's way over here. And my physical hand doesn't move. And I'm like, uh-oh, I'm out of body. And this information starts coming to me. Is that kind of like what you're describing, the phasing model?
Not really, but it's very similar. What I think that was happening to you, and again, I really have no way of really knowing what was happening, but what often happens, you sort of reach this state where you could break loose. You're already loose from your physical body. The thing is, you stay there, within reach of your body. You're not floating away. You could, if you intend to. And that's why you could move your hand away from your non-physical hand, away from your physical hand. And then, so you could do this intentionally, like by meditation or by breathing or whatever, shifting to that state. Or to some people, it just happens naturally. And then what happens, you still in your bedroom, you still feel your bed and you still feel your body, but your consciousness is already shifting into another place, but not fully. So you're still here and you're also there. So both realities kind of overlap and things superimpose. So it's not unusual to maybe look at the ceiling and see the stars in the sky.
Yeah.
Or to see other beings coming through your wall or talking to you or whatever. So that can be a little spooky. But yeah, it kind of is. You were shifting perspectives. You were shifting your attention, maybe intentionally, maybe not, from this reality into the other reality, to a point where both were overlapping.
Since leaving Monroe, it's all been spontaneous. Like I haven't been trying to do it. It just like sort of happens when I'm laying in bed at night. And I do use the Expand app and listen to the sleep frequencies, which, I mean, I guess maybe that gets me to a certain relaxed state, but then it just starts happening. It's always like kind of caught me by surprise. The first time it scared me, but then I remembered my experiences at Gateway and I was like, no. It's nothing to be afraid of. I repeated the affirmation and I was like, it's totally fine. But, yeah, I just wanted your take on that. Like, is this something that you guys hear reports of commonly?
Well, yeah, of course. And that's the result of all the work you did during your Gateway. You invested all these hours into going into these states and using the techniques, and you've been practicing ever since you came back. So now it's paying off.
Interesting.
On the subject of sleep, has the Monroe Institute done very much study in the way of sleep paralysis?
Not really. Sleep paralysis is something very, very... I know it is scary for a lot of people, and naturally so, because it can be very uncomfortable, especially if you don't know what it is. But think of this. Sleep paralysis is something that happens to all of us every night. The only thing is that we're usually not aware of it. And it's actually a good thing. It's like a safety mechanism. If you didn't have a sleep paralysis, you would be enacting your dreams. You would be sleepwalking. You could fall off a window or something.
Yeah.
And the reason why your body gets paralyzed is so you don't enact your dreams.
Sure.
Now, what happens the moment you wake up during the sleep paralysis? You freak out.
Yeah.
Because your body is totally paralyzed and you're like, oh my God, I cannot move.
Yeah.
And not only that, usually when you're in a state of sleep paralysis, like Ryan was experiencing, usually part of your consciousness is somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it's very common for people to report, okay, I wake up in the middle of the night, I open my eyes, I cannot move, I'm totally paralyzed, and now there's people in my room.
Yeah. It's probably the closest thing that I've experienced to being out of body. I've never experienced explicitly being out of body, but I have probably a couple of hundred of experiences with sleep paralysis.
Oh wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it hasn't happened a ton in the last few years. Interestingly, like around the time that we started doing the podcast. But yeah, since I was 11 or 12, it would happen at least a couple of times a month, and it was usually pretty scary. But then the more times I had it, the more kind of interesting they got. I did start to see some entities in the room with me, which that was very scary at first. But then I quickly realized they can't really interact with me directly. They can get close to me. There have been a couple times where they got very close to me. But nothing ever happened.
Nothing happens.
Yeah.
And usually the sleep paralysis is something that people start fearing when they experience it. And then people who want to go out of body, they usually seek them. They usually look for them. Because the sleep paralysis for them is like a gateway into the out-of-body state. Once you experience in the sleep paralysis, you're just a step away from being out of body.
Yeah.
All you need is an intention to be somewhere else.
Yeah. There were a few times where the sleep paralysis would start. And then I don't know if it's sort of like being out of body or whatever, but I would think that my actual body was getting up and walking down the hallway. And then in a snap, I'm back in the bed, and I'm like, there was this one particular instance where that happened, I don't know, 10 or 20 times in a row. I would get up, walk down the hallway, and then I'm back in bed. And then I was like, okay, that's weird. Let me actually get up this time. And I would think I was awake. And again, I'm back in bed. And it would happen over and over and over and over. And then eventually I finally woke up not knowing if I was still asleep or awake or whatever. There were a couple of times like that. And so I've always had this thought that maybe there's got to be some kind of relation.
Yeah, of course. And to me, it sounds like you were really going out of body. Not far away, just down the hallway and then snapping back, as it usually happens. But you sounds like you really did go out of body many times, actually.
Yeah, and it felt completely real.
It is real.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it felt like my body, you know, my physical body. It's been a very long time since something like that has happened. And so I've always been really fascinated about having an out-of-body experience. And I'd like to chase that at some point. But it'll happen when it happens. That's kind of how I let things come to me. I'm not much of like a seeker, go out and get it and find it. I'm like, when it happens, I'll just take the experience in and enjoy it. So.
Yeah, and I guess it should be easier for you because you have all this background, all this previous experience of experiencing the sleep paralysis and actually seeing yourself walking down the hallway and then snapping back.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe,
so probably you're not gonna be scared about it anymore to start with.
Yeah, I think
so. The fear thing is gone for you.
I think I'll be a little less scared than if it had never happened at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's intriguing. It's really intriguing. And I'm excited to have my first out of body experience. I'm manifesting it. It's gonna happen at some point. When it happens, I'll be very.
Well, you have the intention.
Yeah.
See, I didn't even have the intention.
Yeah.
You know, and it happened. So like I can only imagine having the intention and the knowing that it is possible, not only possible, but available for everyone. And that's another thing I wanted to add to your story. Mm-hmm. Like we would be kids. We've known each other since we were 11 and 12, you know. He'd be like staying at my house on a Friday and like, I don't know, me and my brother would be playing Halo or something and he's asleep behind us on the floor. Because we would sit on the floor. I had like a twin bed and we would all sit in my room, sometimes on the floor, and we'd just be playing Xbox or whatever. And he'd be asleep, right? And I'd turn around and he would just suddenly sit up. I'm like, you good, dude? And he's like just kind of stunned. And he's like, he'd be like, I just had sleep paralysis. I mean, it happened a lot, like really a lot. Like I would see it happen over the years, you know, crazy.
When it's happening, you're like tensing your body, like trying to force yourself to get up. And then when you finally do wake up, it's like it all catches up to you.
You would like pop your arms, like, oh my God, like I can move my arms. They would pop. You were so tight and so like tense.
It was a little scary
like you
sometimes.
look like you've been through it. But that's what I like about the Monroe experience, right? Is like, I'll tell you this, man, at least in my experience, it is kind of a little bit scary going out of body for the first time. But it's not because something is trying to scare you. It's because
it's bizarre.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
Imagine your first time riding a roller coaster. It's like, you know, and you know what it's like riding a roller coaster. You know, you're dropping and you're going fast, and it's a different sensation that you're used to feeling. And if I could add a little context, it's like that. It's like it's scary in the sense that it's exciting and it feels a little foreign, but it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I don't have any fear at all associated with the thought of going out of body, probably just because of the sleep paralysis stuff. To me, it just sounds really cool and exciting and magical. So it'd be cool. It'd be really cool. And I would be appreciative of the experience.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're just a step away. If you, as Ryan said, if you just put your intention, you know, and spend some time trying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then one thing, for some reason, as we're talking here, this idea is coming to my mind, like say this, say this, say this. I don't know what it's coming from, but I'm just going to say it. One question for all of you out there who want to go out of body, and a question that I should have asked myself back in the day. I feel like I should have asked myself. And I often ask people when they tell me, oh, I want to go out of body. And my question is, what for? Maybe you guys want to ask yourself, what for? What are you going to do out there? How is that going to benefit your life? Anything of value are you willing to bring back for you? Like here now.
Yeah.
Just going out of body for the sake of going out of body, or you want something out of it? You want
Yeah.
I think that's a good question, open
I do
question
too.
to ask
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And then once you answer that question is, do I need to go out of body in order to achieve that?
Mm.
Or can I do that by other way easier means?
Mm-hmm.
So again, I don't want to discourage anyone by saying, oh, no, just don't go out of body. It's a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love it. But what I would say is don't get too caught up on the tools.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
You know, focus on what you want to build, not on your tools.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
It's like when I went to Monroe for this creator program thing, I'm telling you, I didn't even think that it was possible for me to go out of body. I didn't go there because of that. I went there because my dad and my sister came back to me and they were changed as people. They were changed in a way, especially my sister. And I wanted to go because I told you this on the last day of the creator program. I said for years I've wanted a teacher, and I've wanted somebody who can, you know, because things have spontaneously been happening to us our whole lives, my family or whatever. I wanted to find somebody who could help me develop these things so that they were no longer unconscious. And everybody out there is like, yeah, out of body this, out of body that. That's great. But Monroe is so much more than that. It's a place where you can develop. I think about it like this. There are a lot of people in this world, I believe, who are psychic potential, right? Have abilities, but are not aware of it or are not conscious of how to make contact with it and use it in a meaningful, beneficial way in their lives. And I think Monroe is the place where you go to develop that. It's so much more than going out of body. It's like you said, what are you seeking from this experience?
Yeah, and I think you put it beautifully. And one thing that Monroe gives to a lot of people is a framework in which things get normalized.
Yeah.
And that's probably a good point to talk about. You know, this has been this kind of psychic phenomena has been happening since the inception of humankind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always like, oh, this is so special and it's been validated because here's the evidence. Okay, all of that is great, but when are we going to normalize this? Like this happens or is accessible to any human being. Now, can we please move on? Can we all accept that this is a fact, that the out-of-body experience is a reality, that there are other realities, there are entities out there now? What do we do with it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think one thing that Monroe gives a lot of people is normalcy about these things. Because you can't imagine how many people come freaking out, like things like you were experiencing, like, oh, I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't move, I'm so scared, I don't know what to do, nobody understands anything. People think I'm crazy, or I see dead people at night and they ask for my help and I don't know what to do with that. That happens a lot. Or I see lights in the sky and nobody else sees them. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. You go to Monroe and it's like, well, yeah, that's what we do here all the time.
That's normal stuff.
Yeah. And so it gives people a framework in which that's normal.
Yeah.
And that in itself, that thing alone, you know, puts a lot of people at ease. Okay, this is normal. Now what? What's next? Now what do I guess next question would be, now what do I do with this?
Yeah.
Now that I'm sort of normalizing this thing, how do I integrate it into my life? How do I integrate into this physical human life the fact that there's other realities out there? The fact that you don't die when you die. And if you ask me what is the main thing that we do at Monroe is allow the people to turn beliefs into knowns. Because you can believe that there is an afterlife, but you don't know, do you?
Right.
And having one of those experiences, like an out-of-body experience or something similar, can prove to yourself that it's actually real.
Right. Yeah.
But again, the gap between believing and knowing is massive. It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, because belief is almost active, whereas knowing is passive.
Yeah.
It's subconscious. It's you don't have to try at all. You just know.
Yeah.
Belief feels maybe like it requires some effort.
It's an act. Yeah. It's like, I don't know for sure, but I get it.
I
totally
actively
get it.
believe.
Yeah.
It's active.
Yeah. And if you think of it, ultimately, why would you even have any belief at all? Why would you believe anything at all? Why just not suspend judgment until you really know or don't know?
That's interesting.
That's something we put a lot of emphasis on too. Like beliefs just get in the way, basically.
That's really interesting.
And some beliefs can be very useful. For instance, if you believe yourself to be all capable, I'm just a hard worker. I can handle anything.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to be positive. Maybe you're going to burn yourself out eventually.
Yeah.
But, some beliefs can really take you really far. But most of them are just limitations that we have.
Yeah.
And why not say something like, okay, I don't know one way or another. I don't know if this is true or not. So I just don't believe anything. I just suspend my belief until I have a chance to find out. And then I know, or I don't. I tried and I failed. Well, I still don't know.
Yeah. I relate to that a lot. I feel that's kind of how I accept information. I stay somewhat agnostic to a lot of ideas until I fully and firmly know for myself.
That's the healthiest thing to do. And sad thing is most people don't do that. People usually very quickly jump into, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Or I do believe it. Now I'm a believer. Feed me anything. I'll swallow anything you give me.
Yeah.
Or no, I just don't believe it. That's not true.
Yeah. And they grasp to those beliefs. And it's like an attachment. It's a very strong attachment.
Yeah. Or even the opposite. Being a skeptic is very healthy. But some people take skepticism to a level of almost religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just don't believe it. And that's my religion. I just don't believe anything.
Yeah.
Well, and some people say, there's no afterlife. And they believe that so strongly that guess what happens to them when they die? They find themselves alive. And in their minds, there's only one reality, and it's this one. So if they see themselves alive, they believe they're still alive in the human body, because that's all there is. And then these guys turn into ghosts.
Wow.
Can we dive into that?
Yeah. I was actually going to ask when we got to...
Because I'm very interested in the Lifeline.
Well, that brings me to my next question then, because I was waiting for the right moment to inject this, and now it has presented itself. I was going to ask, based on your pretty much almost lifetime of, your experiences with Monroe and being a trainer, my question was, what's your take on life after death? We've already naturally gotten there, but I had to say the question. So,
well, my take, based on my experience and the experiences of hundreds and hundreds of people that have come to our classes, especially Lifeline, which is a graduate program that you can take after Gateway, focused specifically on life after life. And so based on my experience and other people's, I know, you see, again, I don't believe, now I know that you simply don't die. You cannot die. I mean, you are an immortal being. And when you die here, you pop up somewhere else. Basically, that's what happens. Where are you going to pop up? That's kind of tricky. That it's not like this place where everyone goes. It would mainly depend on what your state of consciousness is.
Yeah.
So if you die in a state of bliss and very high frequency, whatever, you're probably going to find yourself in a place that matches that and see angelic beings and this and that. And if you die in a state of torment, fear or horror, probably you're going to show up in a pretty ugly place. Then again, you're not going to stay there forever. You know, everybody moves on eventually. Some people stay in one given place for longer or shorter or whatever. And we have done so much work on life after death, you wouldn't believe. I mean, when Bob Monroe came up with Lifeline, at the beginning, it was like a research experiment, really like everything at Monroe. So he would give participants, we don't do that anymore for several reasons, but up until quite recently, we would give participants in Lifeline contact sheets, what we call contact sheets, which is like a form. And every time you find someone on the other side, you would write their name, where they lived, how they died, and enough data that you could verify that that was actually real. And then we would look up the cases. And yes, this John Smith really lived in Minnesota, and his wife was Nancy, and he was an architect, and he died in a car crash. This actually happened. And we validated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases. And then it was like, okay, what's the point on validating any of this anymore? Once you know it's real, it's like what I said before. Okay, it's real. We know it's real. Now
move on.
Can we move on?
Yeah.
Let's get to work.
What's next? Yeah.
Do you remember in our creator group when we were watching that documentary on TV? I can't remember the channel. I think it was Lifetime.
I think it was Biography Channel.
Yeah, it was one of those big channels that I can't remember.
Yeah, they
If it
shoot
was-
that piece in 2011. I was back there at the institute back in the day, and that was a Lifeline class. And
Dude.
they sent a TV crew to take Lifeline, actually.
Yeah, and do you
Yeah.
remember that the first name of the person that they spoke?
Bledsoe.
It was Bledsoe. We gasped. Yeah, I looked at you and you were like, and you told me after, you were like, I've seen this hundreds of times, and I never thought about it. It was just, it was weird. It was totally weird.
Yeah, it totally, went over my radar.
It was like Daniel Bledsoe or something was the first name on the documentary thing, and I thought that was so peculiar because the second time ever, to my knowledge, that the Monroe Institute will ever be on TV is going to be because of the History Channel thing, which we haven't gone into much detail about, but we have been authorized to at least talk about it, right? I just thought that was weird that both times that I think it was Lifetime or whatever, and then we have an upcoming History Channel appearance with Monroe. Both of them have a Bledsoe, so I was like, this is weird. This is weird.
It is weird. And one thing that happened on that documentary that we didn't know, because these guys came and they shoot the piece, they spent the whole week there, and then they left and they told us, okay, we'll let you know when this comes in the air. And so then they told us, okay, it's going to be this Tuesday, whatever. So everyone's there watching Biography Channel. What we didn't know is that they actually afterwards, they hire a professional investigator to validate the cases.
Mm-hmm.
And they did.
And they show it. Yeah.
And they
no,
show
they do.
it
Like
in the documentary.
they were real people. Like they found their graves and everything.
And
Oh,
they even
wow.
interview their families, their descendants and everything.
So now they show it at Gateway as like educational material. Like,
I'd
you know.
love to see that.
yeah. Yeah, it's out there.
That's really spectacular.
Yeah, I'll try to find it for you.
Yeah.
It's really cool, dude.
Wow.
Yeah, it's awesome stuff.
And the first name was Bledsoe. That's just
Of the like dead person.
That's just too much of a coincidence. Your first time being there, you're watching this, and
Yeah.
then you hear your last name.
It's not a common name. I don't know. I just thought it was weird. I don't want to read too much into it, but I did find it peculiar that both TV appearances, which again, the second one's not out yet, it was delayed. Both of them have a Bledsoe. I was like, maybe I'm in the right place. I don't know.
You are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure it was reaffirming.
So, did you have a question? I didn't mean to cut.
Well, something I'm a little curious about is something that you said earlier, which is that we as in Monroe know this information, and it's not a spectacular thing. We're not all wondering if we know this or if we believe it. And then you mentioned that the world doesn't necessarily always match up with these beliefs or this knowledge, even though it feels like, don't we all know this by now? Well, I'm curious on your take of like, what is holding the world back from knowing this stuff? Why is there so much pushback and rejection?
I think it's probably the Western approach that we have to science.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think so too.
It has taken us really, really far. Like it has taken us even out of the planet and into space and everything. But this hyper-rationalization of everything and this way of looking at things, if my tools cannot measure it, then it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is funny if you think of it. What if there's something out there that your tools cannot measure? It happens all the time.
There is.
It happened with brainwaves. Before, you didn't have gamma brainwaves. Guess why? Because the electrodes were not sensitive enough. So gamma waves didn't exist.
Yeah.
Bacteria.
Yeah, bacteria didn't exist.
Thousands
The guy
of years.
the guy who discovered microbes and germs, he ended up in a psychiatric hospital. Everybody made fun of him. Oh, the guy who sees little creatures.
Yeah, in the water.
In the water, and they couldn't measure it. Therefore, it didn't exist. And it's always like that. And if you go to other cultures that we often label as primitive, who live in the Amazon jungle or whatever, they have it fully integrated in their lives. Even for even more developed cultures like India, well, the afterlife is a fact for all of them.
Yeah.
They don't even question it. Or the ability to contact the spirits, or in many cultures that's a given. They even have a shaman who's the professional guy who does that.
Yeah.
And when you need it, you just go to the shaman and he does it for you. He opens that door for you and then you look into it or whatever.
Yeah.
So why cannot we do the same thing? And then the thing is, we usually don't acknowledge this publicly, maybe out of shame or because we don't want to ruin our careers. Oh, I'm this respected scientist. I don't want to say that I believe in an afterlife because then I'm going to be ostracized.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, in the privacy of our lives, we all sort of know or believe that this is a thing, but then like we're not quite there yet, which is like mainstream. It's like there's consensus in society, like, yes, this is real.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think it is somewhat that like hyper rationalization of Western culture. And yeah, I mean, even a more recent example of something we have no idea what it is. It's like dark energy, dark matter. These scientists are like, it's everywhere. We know it's everywhere. We have no idea what it is.
It's 94% of the entire universe.
The whole universe. We're surrounded by it right now.
Yeah.
We have no clue what it is. And it's like, I find it fascinating that these brilliant scientific minds, it's like they have zero imagination. That they have no willingness to say maybe, like to have that agnosticism of saying maybe.
There you go. That mentality of what if this were real, what would it be like?
Yeah.
And some brilliant scientists, the most brilliant ones, were actually the ones who had imagination. Like Einstein, the way he came up with his theory of relativity was like, he asked himself, what would it be like to be traveling faster than light? What would that feel like? Oh, it would bend time and space and this. And also Nikola Tesla, when he was 12, he went to Niagara Falls. And he was like, oh my God, that's so much energy. What would it be like to harness that energy? And he created the first ever, hydroelectric plant in the world.
Yeah.
But, most scientists are not like that.
Yeah, it's true. And as soon as they, like Einstein and Tesla, as soon as they have a theory or something that's a little weird, everybody's like, lock him up. He's lost his mind. He's a weirdo.
Yep.
It's like,
yeah, the mantra in science generally is don't rock the boat.
Yeah, but
like,
why?
Don't get out of the consensus comfortable reality.
Yeah, let's rock it. Let's rock the boat. Seriously.
That's something that my dad and I have talked about for a long time. Because, we've had our own history of, seeing the beings and all that stuff that's been going on for almost 20 years. It'll be 18 in January, right? So that's something that we've come to understand is like, for starters, having a supernatural experience that you're viewing externally, seeing a ghost or, a being or a UFO or whatever, to me, in my opinion, is very, very, very finely separated. Like it's a very close phenomenon to going out of body and what happens at Monroe. It's just a little different, right? It's inner versus outer. But to me, it's like the same thing. There's a connection. So anyway, my dad and I have been talking about this for like 18 years. Well, if they were to come out and finally acknowledge in a broad sense that like, okay, consciousness is a thing and life after death, you're immortal, all the stuff we've been talking about, the opinion we've come to is like, well, there'd be a lot of people out of a job. There'd be a lot of people who have to rewrite their textbooks and would have to admit, okay, I've been wrong, ostracizing people, my whole career. So it's like, it's a tough nut to crack.
Yeah, you know what happens? It really challenges the whole status quo of things, and it opens so many questions that nobody wants to go there. Like another thing, and sometimes science does look into these things. Like at Princeton, Dr. Nelson and I think it was Barbara Dunn, they spent 30 years collecting data in a lab with protocols that were, way more solid than in any other experiments because they knew they were going to be scrutinized very heavily. They were proving for 30 years that mind effects matter.
Yeah.
And guess what? And I remember being in Portugal, watching Barbara Dunn, giving a presentation on their work, 3 decades of collecting data, very solid data. And she said, we were expecting that finally the scientific community would look into it. Well, guess what? It never happened. No one ever cared. And then they stopped doing the experiments because what was the point of accumulating more and more data if no one's going to look at it?
Yeah.
So there is scientific evidence that mind effects matter. There's scientific evidence of psychokinesis. There's scientific evidence of telepathy. And it's been proven again and again and again and again. But guess what? People keep on saying, oh, no, there's no evidence. Well, guess what? There is.
Yeah, a lot of it, actually.
Yeah.
Guess what?
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you guys have heard of this yet. This just happened days ago. Literally, like breaking news. The first ever recorded evidence of genuine dream communication.
What?
How did it just happen? Like literally last week. It was an experiment, and I don't know the name of the scientist, but it'll be very easy. Just Google it, Alex, if you don't mind. Dream communication, and they like set it up in laboratory conditions, and they developed their own dream language. And they had two people with these headphones that are measuring like brain waves, and they communicated with the dream language in their sleep. Just happened.
I wanna see that.
Yeah, well, Alex
That's
is going to find it for
incredible.
us, but I also have it in a DM. I could find it real quick if you guys want me to.
That's really
yeah, dude. It's
incredible.
like I've been seeing it all over my feed lately.
Yeah, it's funny because we've talked about quite a few of these experiments over the years.
Found it?
I've always been really fascinated in science with science as well. I feel I have an equal fascination with science and spirit.
Because they go like this.
They are
The
married.
reality is
they are married.
Yeah.
We actually have a little segment we do sometimes called Spirit Science, where we kind of talk about how they relate.
Like data of spiritual things. We should do an out of body one.
Oh, let's do it. That would
we
be
should do an
great.
out-of-body
Yeah.
one.
But I mean, we talk about these studies and they're so profound and mind-blowing and concise and definite. And then it's like, whatever came of this, nothing. No, we just do nothing
Couple
with
of
this.
dorks talking about it.
Yes, just like a couple dorky dudes on a podcast talking about it, and it's like, whoa, why are we not doing
what
this?
happened with the revelation by the Pentagon about a year ago? Pentagon saying publicly in all mainstream media, "Hey, UFOs are real," and everyone's like, "Okay, whatever."
Okay, cool. Like, what's happening? Am I crazy? Like, why aren't we
No,
talking?
you're
about
the one
this
that's
stuff?
not crazy.
I know. Why aren't we talking about this stuff more?
Yeah.
It's shocking, honestly.
I think Alex found it.
Yeah, I found the article. So it's a startup from the Bay Area, but they developed two-way communication between people and dreams. So recently, on September 24th, they linked two people in a lucid dream state and achieved communication, and then they did that again in October.
How is this not
That's very
every
cool.
headline in every news publication?
Yeah, and you see, that's something that doesn't surprise me because that happens at Monroe all the time.
Yeah.
The thing is, we don't have a means to prove it to other people.
Sure.
But like in Gateway or
It was
any other
happening to all
program,
of us.
it was happening all the time. Oh, I saw you in my meditation. Oh, I saw you too. You were behind that tree. Yes, there I was.
Yeah.
And you were doing this. And yes, I was doing that. Happens all the time.
Yeah. It's just funny that people normally, they need
Yeah.
this. They need the headline and the article and the guys in the coats and like
Exactly.
They need a movie too.
Yes, they need all of that stuff to believe it. It's like, it's right there. Why is that not on every TV? Why aren't we telling everybody? Because I feel that the moment that everybody in this world can at least get on the same page with that we are more than our bodies, we would be in a better place.
Well,
Yeah.
of course, that's the whole purpose of the exploration of human consciousness, to get to know that these things are real, and then, as we said before, you move on, you do something about it, you do something with it.
Yeah, let's
Right?
move forward.
This brings me to a good point. I've been waiting also for the right moment to ask this question. I wanted to get your take, and it perfectly aligns with all this stuff we're talking about Monroe's mission and purpose.
Well, the Monroe Institute's mission and purpose is to allow people to explore consciousness. That's what we do, the exploration of consciousness, and to provide these tools to as many people as possible. Our mission goal right now, it's very ambitious. I don't know if we're gonna get there.
You're gonna get
but
there.
it's to get these tools available to 1% of the world population. That's 8 million people. That's quite a lot.
80 million.
Well, 80 million, yeah, you're right.
80 million out of 8 billion, 1%.
Yeah. And guess what? But once we decided that was the goal, then people like you started showing up.
Yep.
Is it not funny?
It is. Yeah.
People with large audiences and who can really spread the message out there. So yeah, set up an intention and let it roll, I guess.
And so here's the thing, like specifically what if you go to Monroe Institute, is it a .org? I guess it's Monroe.org.
Yes.
I don't know the
.org.
MonroeInstitute.org, and you go click on the about page, and it says like, I think it says about, right? Our mission and purpose to advance the global awakening of human consciousness.
Yes.
So the belief, actually, we could maybe talk about M5000. When Robert Monroe was alive, he believed that if he could just put 5,000 people through, that it would change the world, that it would like impact the consciousness of the whole world. And as we know, that 5,000 number filled up very quickly. And he's like, okay, maybe it's a bigger number, so they've arrived at 1%. But, what we've been talking about kind of like goes along with that. Like what would happen if the whole world was to get on the same page? That's actually Monroe's mission, is to try to literally shift the entire collective consciousness by seeking that 1% number of the total population, hoping that, putting so many people through the gateway and altering their understanding about reality and things, that it could have like a tidal wave effect on all of consciousness.
Oh yeah, I tend to think that it absolutely would.
I'm personally very aligned with that mission.
Yeah.
I think I told you this, both of you this. I keep pointing off camera. It's because Emily's right here behind us. You guys will see Emily next week. But yeah, so I told you guys this at Gateway, but like my dad and I have been kind of on a similar mission to get people to like see the lights, the things that we see. And I've always had it in my head it has to be 51%. For some reason. I'm like, if we could get 51% of the world to see this, then it would be a change. And then I went to Monroe and I heard 1%, and I was like, honestly, I like that better.
That's a more modest.
I like that a lot better.
More modest number.
It's a little less pressure.
It's not 4 billion.
Yeah, versus 80
yeah.
billion. But,
yeah.
It's ambitious, but
Yeah, usually the critical mass doesn't need to be that big. There's a tipping point at some stage. It's like that experiment, the 100th monkey experiment. Like you probably all know about it. Like some monkeys started using some, I don't know, rocks to crack nuts or something. And once a number of monkeys learned how to do that, then all monkeys in isolated areas which had no contact with those monkeys started doing the same thing.
It's a morphogenetic resonance?
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Rupert Sheldrake's theory.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I
guess we could do the same thing, right? If enough of us put this thing out there, then eventually it would be like a tipping point where all of a sudden, first gradually and then, doof. Then,
yeah, the snowball causes the avalanche.
Yeah.
You just need a little snowball.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we get there in this lifetime of ours.
I feel a surge.
Yeah.
I feel a big
surge.
There's a big pull to this conversation in the world, I feel.
And over the years, I've seen this change because you always had people interested in this kind of thing. But before it was like very fringe, very out there. And now it's a lot more normalized. You hear people talking about channeling. You hear people talking about UFOs. Like it's a more normal thing.
Yeah.
And it actually is. So I think we get in there.
Yeah.
The thing is, it always seems slow to us. Again, because we see things from the perspective of this lifetime. But if you think of it on a wider spectrum, probably 3, 4, 5 generations down the road, maybe it's completely normalized and we will be dead.
Yeah.
Of course. But maybe it's what it takes. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's an admirable goal. I think it's important.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely feel a surge too. I feel a change. I didn't talk much to you guys about this, and we've recorded a whole other episode about this, but just 2 weekends ago, we were on the beach with 200 people. We had a little mass sighting going on, and we saw like basically 150 orbs with 200 people. And we saw orbs appear, and we all saw it from different perspectives because we were all looking at different times. Like I was looking first. I got everybody's attention on it, and then Alex and Nick and the rest of the crowd saw it from different angles. So it looked a little different to everybody, but there were these glowing golden beings that just appeared, and they had wings and they were flapping their wings, and everybody was freaking out. And I'm telling you guys that for days, because we have a Discord community on our Patreon with like 600 people in there, and for days people were sending me reports, not just me but the whole community, right? And they're explaining like how they're like, people were, your typical on the end of the gateway experience, last day, you're talking about grounding and all of these things that are happening to people. That was happening to these people. I feel like there was a genuine expansion of consciousness, and I just kept thinking like, wow, that's exactly what it was like being at Monroe. And I feel like this kind of expansion of consciousness is rapidly spreading. I think that we are now at a point where I think we're kind of past the belief point, and I think now we're at the point where people are just ready to have the experience. You know what I mean? Now it's like it's time to open the door. Come in. Like, get the people in. Like, I really do feel like the tide has shifted, and it's time now to really
and I think you're making a really good point
push.
On saying that, people need to have the experience, because what is the point of trying to make people believe this or that? telling them, oh, this is real. Please just believe me.
Yeah.
Believe me, bro. Well, how about we just give them the tools so they can, find out that it is actually real.
Yeah.
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 Find out for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
So that brings me to another point. I just, for giggles, I feel like there could be a possibility of people out there being really curious about grounding techniques after an expansion of consciousness. So if you wouldn't mind elaborating on that, because that could be helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah, what happens sometimes if you spend maybe too long on meditation, like I've had people in Gateway saying, well, I meditate like 4 times a day or 5 times a day, and then I listen to these sounds, and then I do this and I do that. And you seem like totally like not here, obviously. And doing that kind of thing is fine, but you also need to be functional here in your physical body in this 3D reality. So it's generally very simple things that you can do to bring yourself back into your body, move your body, actually, like do physical exercise, go run, go out there, touch some grass, hug a tree, things like that. Swim, especially if you have access to a large body of water like the ocean next to here or a lake. Go swimming on a lake. Maybe heavier foods than usual. Also splashing some water on your face. If you come back from a meditation and you're like all spaced out or whatever, maybe splash some cold water on your face, on the back of your neck, on your wrists. Sex is very grounding too.
Good to know.
Yeah. That's a good excuse, right?
I'm just thinking what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it is. And it's also physical activity.
There you go.
You get your body moving. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of sensations.
Yeah.
A lot of bodily sensations.
It really brings you in your body. Right?
Yeah, no, I fully imagine so. I'm somebody who I've talked about this a few times, but I kind of always feel a little bit ungrounded. And here in the last like month or two, I'm like getting really back into exercise, and I feel so much more grounded than I have felt in years.
Yeah.
Years.
There you go.
And I'm like appreciative of this feeling of I feel like I'm always just spaced out, and I don't really feel like I'm here. And not even like actively doing anything that would facilitate that state. It's just kind of my like natural way of being. And it's not always comfortable, it doesn't always feel very comfortable, but I've been trying things lately to ground, like grounding outside, touching grass.
Another thing that works well is doing something with your hands. If you like working with wood, or you like working with clay, or knitting, or mechanics, or whatever, tearing up an engine and putting it back, that kind of thing gets you very, very focused here in the here and now, and on the physical aspect of things.
Yeah.
Also, if you play an instrument, playing a guitar, playing piano, whatever, it gets you very, very focused here. And it's also a great means of expression for things that are kind of abstract. Maybe you cannot put into words.
Absolutely.
If you come back from a meditation and you're like, I have this knowledge, but I can't even put it into words. Well, how about you just play it or sing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I love to play music. That's very grounding for me. Cooking is something with my hands. That's very grounding for me. And they do both also feel very expressive. Yeah. I kind of feel my emotions flow out of me much better than I could do with words.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I noticed a big difference in playing music after Gateway. Like how I am able to focus on it and think about it is different than before the Gateway. Like I can't explain it, but I did notice a big change.
So I've got a question. So Nick and I are about to go through our creation station in about 2 months.
Shout out Ignacio.
So what would you tell me and Nick? So we've never done anything Monroe Institute. So I guess advice for us going into our first.
My advice for you would be open-minded and be very curious. That's all you need to take with you. Yeah.
That's the biggest. I'm very curious. That's what's pulling me, is just the pure curiosity. And earlier when you were talking about people who want to go out of body and the why, for me, the why is just a strong curiosity. Nothing else.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Curiosity is a good thing.
Yeah. It feels exciting. It's very curious.
And that's a very good question, because a lot of people ask, do I need to do anything in preparation for Gateway or this or that? And it's like, no. Just, put your expectations in a box if you can, and just be curious and open-minded. Be open to be surprised, I would say.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, gosh, it's such an honor and a privilege that you came all the way out here to be on our show.
Hey, thank you for the invitation.
I mean, it just kind of happened organically, and I think it's just like so amazing that we developed a friendship out of this, and it's not over here. You know that.
I know it.
Yeah, but so just thank you so much, and this is really special to me that you guys would come here and do this.
Very
Likewise.
special. Thank you.
Yeah.
Really, thank you for having me.
Of course. It was our pleasure and honor.
Yeah.
Certainly.
And privilege. Is there anything left on your heart that you got to get off, or do you feel like you're pretty content?
I'm pretty content.
All right. Well, we have a exit ritual. Although it's not that serious, but we, I mean, I got to explain it. But we
exit ritual.
Yeah, ooh. Yeah. We like to say bye, guys, at the same time. It's just something we started doing like hundreds of episodes ago, and I don't know where it came from.
I don't either. We said it in the first episode, and we just never stopped.
Yeah, but now we're locked in.
So
no, I think it was like the second or third episode. You just said it and you cut it short. But anyway, you ready?
Yeah.
All
Bye,
right.
guys.
Bye, guys. What up, homies?
If you like the show and want more, check out patreon.com/Bledsoe said so.
This will get you exclusive weekly bonus shows and access to our Discord community with hundreds of open-minded people just like you.
If you want to represent the show, go to bledsoesaidso.com for merch. We have t-shirts, hats, hoodies, and more.
For all future updates, follow us on Instagram at Bledsoe Said So.
Same time next week.